What is going on, everyone? Welcome back into another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Tuman, as always, joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. We are continuing our NFL division previews here today with the AFC North. Mike, last season, the North was kind of weird. The Ravens had some issues with Lamar Jackson, led to the whole contract drama in the offseason, but that's been settled. The Bengals, once again, after their Super Bowl appearance, they made an AFC title game again. Mike Tomlin continued to defy the odds and get the Steelers over 500. And we know about all the drama surrounding the Browns, Deshaun Watson. So heading into this season, we kind of talked about the East being a really competitive division. Do you see this division also kind of being anyone's to take, or do you think maybe the top end of the division sets apart from the rest?
I think the Bengals are like very clearly the most complete team at the top of this division. I don't think it's really up for debate. Although I don't think the Steelers and Ravens are as bad as some people might say they are. I just think that the Bengals have just like a firm grasp on like what their team is trying to do, how they've built it. Like they just keep adding weapons, and I don't see any reason that they would lose the division to um I guess I should say unbalanced teams like the Ravens or the Steelers, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Burrow, he was dealing with that calf injury that kind of gave everyone a scare early in
Mm.
camp, but it looks like he's going to be all right. I know, was it T. Higgins? I forget who said, but someone said like one of his teammates said he shouldn't even play week one. He should let that heal. He should take a few weeks off just to make sure he's ready for the stretch run. Doesn't really seem like it's going to go that way. I think Joe Burrow is going to be suiting up week one, and they're going to anticipate him just being Joe Burrow as always.
I understand the caution of like waiting 1 week. You also don't want to start off badly because you weren't playing with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, he should be fine. Like he just doesn't he won't play in the preseason, probably won't play in any intensive practices from here on out. I don't think they need to go like that far because sometimes like you if you don't get into rhythm, like even if you're a good team, you could like lose. So I think not playing Burrow would be a disservice week one because you want to get the chemistry flowing between the teams.
If he feels he's healthy enough to play, I think he should play. Uh,
Exactly.
with that in mind, this Bengals offense is lethal, and it's what has allowed them to become contenders over the past 2 years. That
Hmm.
trio of receivers, Jamar Chase, who, I mean, I took him first overall in one of my fantasy drafts. I already had Jefferson in 2 leagues. Didn't want to triple down in case of an injury. So I think Jamar Chase, I mean, back at LSU, he was an even more heralded prospect than Jefferson. And you throw
Yeah.
in Higgins, who's awesome. Tyler Boyd's been there forever. I think that's the best wide receiver room in the league, and plus you got Joe
Probably.
Burrow, an elite quarterback. So, do you see any scenario where the Bengals aren't once again an elite offense?
I think the only scenario would be like an if a scenario where like an injury happens. But I think other than that, I think they've really like improved their offensive line since that Super Bowl season because that really is, Aaron Donald was able to feast on them in that Super Bowl. I think they've really improved. Orlando Brown, I think he's a little like up and down, but he's gonna help solidify one of their tackle spots. I think that they've really improved like the big area of weakness, which was the offensive line. So I think they should be fine.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny the way they've kind of approached improving that O line, and it's definitely improved. I completely agree. Orlando Brown, he's on the Ravens and the Chiefs. He's blocking for great quarterbacks, Lamar, Mahomes. Now he's going to be with Burrow, chasing a Super Bowl. And then guys Tom Brady, who blocked for Tom Brady, Ted Karras, Alex Kappa. They had
Mhm.
solid enough resumes. I think Alex Kappa even made a Pro Bowl one season. They come along, and Jonah Williams at right tackle, he was a highly drafted player, so they have high expectations for him. Really, it's just Cordell Volson at guard, but even then, he was a rookie last season. He could get better as well. And with Orlando Brown helping him on the left side, maybe he will get better. Obviously,
Mhm.
Lyle Collins, who was their left tackle last season, still on the roster, but dealing with a torn ACL, torn MCL. So if he returns, won't be towards the end of the season, but even still, by signing Orlando Brown, they got a great replacement or even a partner for him in the future if they keep Lyle Collins.
Well, it kind of depends. I believe they signed into a 2-year deal last offseason. So, and Lyle Collins, he's getting up there in age. So if Jonah Williams, proves that he can just replace him and he's serviceable or if not better, then there's a chance Lyle Collins, we don't see him come back, which is unfortunate because when he plays, he's honestly probably one of the better offensive linemen in the league. And even if like some injuries happen, they have Jackson Carman. They drafted him highly, the same year as Jamar Chase, I believe. And he played pretty well down the stretch last year as well at guard, I believe he was playing. He was playing where
Yeah.
was it did he replace Volson or Kappa? He replaced one of the guards and he played pretty well. So like he could always come in and play tackle or guard as well if necessary. So I think their offensive line, I think they've done a huge improvement like and really fixing it. And I think that's really going to show hopefully this year with the Orlando Brown signing, especially.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's why I think the Bengals. And I'll get ahead of the predictions here. I still think they're the best team in this division, even
Yeah.
though I really do like the talent in this division. I still don't see the Bengals. I see them as a Super Bowl contender, maybe even a team that wins the AFC. And even the running back room, it's pretty much the same. They did draft Chase Brown from Illinois, who Penn State fans know from the 9 overtime game. I think he had like 150 rush yards in that game. So that's why I knew of him when since he took him. But you got Captain America, Chris Evans in there, and then obviously Joe Mixon as RB1. Joe Mixon's like off-field stuff kind of just got, as it seems to always with Joe Mixon, kind of just got swept under the rug. So I guess
Kind of
he'll
just
be there
disappeared.
all season. Yeah, it always seems to happen that way with Joe Mixon, but
It's kind of odd because with like the whole college stuff that happened, it was kind of just like he did like the community service or whatever and it went away. But this one was like a lot more serious and they
yeah,
just kind of let it happen. But I don't think the Bengals are complaining necessarily because they still have their star running back. Like you're saying, Chase Brown, he's definitely a serviceable backup, possibly even a spot starter if anything does end up happening with Joe Mixon. Because did they say already if like they're not for sure suspending him, or is that still kind of pending?
I haven't heard anything about it. Like
Kind of up in the
like
air.
Kamara wise, we were hearing it rumored for a while.
Mhm.
I don't think, to my knowledge, I've seen any Joe Mixon rumors.
Well, I guess the Bengals, I mean, I guess they can't complain about it. But no, I agree with you. Although I think the other teams have a lot of talent, I just think that the Bengals are the most like well-balanced roster in this division. You can't win with only offense or only defense. If you're lacking on one side of the ball, you're not really gonna get far into the postseason if you even make the postseason. So I think that the Bengals are just because they've kept a lot of like consistency with like their Super Bowl team. A lot of these good players are still on this team. A lot
Yeah.
of them are coming back from injuries. They've bolstered some of the other weaker parts with like high profile rookies. So I think they're doing a great job at what they're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, I completely agree. Looking at their defense as well, I mean, you start with that D line, that front seven. When you're going against Pat Mahomes, you're going against Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. Got to get the quarterback, got to disrupt. And this D line is still as fearsome as ever, maybe even more than it has been before. Obviously, Trey Hendrickson, who they signed from the Saints a few years ago, is the main star. But then you got Reeder and Hill as run stoppers. And then they drafted Miles Murphy in the first round from Clemson.
Yeah.
And I know, like, from what I understood, I'm not a huge college football guy, but seemed like kind of raw, kind of up and down, but he's one of those guys with all the physical tools. And you put him on Lou Anarumo's defense, opposite guys like Hendrickson and Hubbard, like maybe even as a rookie, as a situational guy, maybe he can kind of tap into that quick.
I like what I saw out of him. I think he's exactly what like the Bengals like to look for in their DNs, their edge rushers. So I think that was a smart decision, but I think it's going to pay dividends eventually. Maybe not this year, but if he can come in, make a few plays, show some development, I think that's always good for them.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing they've kind of been missing from this defense was that type of outside linebacker edge guy. Hendrickson can get to the quarterback, but I think he's kind of always profiled as in the trenches DN
Hmm.
lining up from there. Where I feel Murphy, he'll kind of be more of a kind of not I'm not saying he'll be as good as Khalil Mack, but that kind of player can be DN outside linebacker, kind of just
Yeah.
rush the quarterback in quick fashion. So I like that. Then you look at their linebacker core. I mean, Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson have taken huge steps over the past few seasons. I don't really question either of their ability to be starters on this team. What do you think about the secondary? I think that's the most interesting part of this defense. They lost Eli Apple, so no more burnt toast memes, but I don't know. He was a veteran who started there. Now they got some younger guys, DJ Turner, Cam Taylor Britt, excuse me, kind of lining up opposite Chidobe Awuzie, who's coming back from an injury. So what's your take on that crew?
I think the secondary has a lot of potential. The problem is they're counting on a lot of young guys to really come in. Awuzie, he's really like the only starter that's had like a lot of experience. Nick Scott, he came from Penn State. That's our guy, and he was a starter on the Rams Super Bowl winning team.
Mhm.
So he as well is there, but I think I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to have some growing pains though. And I think that would push through that, especially with Dax Hill, because now he's a starter fully this time, and he's
Mhm.
starting at safety. So it's going to see interesting how like that kind of position change. He played a lot of corner last year when they were lacking because of Wuzie got injured. But I think this is going to be a good secondary. I think they're going to need to get their feet under them, but I think once they do, they should be pretty solid.
Yeah, so they lost. Obviously, Jesse Bates was the big loss going to Atlanta. He was a Pro Bowl caliber safety. They also lost Von Bell, who pretty solid, strong safety as well.
Hmm.
Um, and then Dax Hill, you mentioned he was their first round pick last season. Supposed to be a safety, played a little corner, but honestly just didn't play a lot in general. So
Hmm.
he's going to be expected to be a starter. I saw him playing in the preseason game a lot for the against the Packers last week. So yeah, it seems like they're anticipating him to have a big role, and then DJ Turner, their rookie as well. So I don't know. I think they've proven as a unit over the past few seasons that they can definitely compete. Now, losing a guy like Jesse Bates especially could be a big hit, but if Dax Hill can quickly adapt, kind of fulfill that draft position, maybe it won't be a huge loss. And at that point, maybe that's their weakness, but I don't know. I think they're going to be able to adapt. I think this team's going to be really good. I mean, obviously injuries you always take into account, but if you're just looking at teams on paper, they're one of the surest things in the NFL this season.
Hmm.
I'm interested though to hear your take on a team that has certainly not been a sure thing over the past few seasons, the Ravens. Now they're always competitive, they're never a bad team, but it doesn't always go their way. They'll have some playoff losses. A couple years ago, they missed the playoffs. Lamar Jackson's had some ill-timed injuries, not too severe, but kind of they linger and they kind of bring the Ravens season down. But now he's got his contract extension that he wanted, and he deserved. I think the contract extension stuff was so strange to me, and I'm honestly surprised the Ravens were the team that gave him the deal. I thought if anything, maybe a trade eventually was going to have to be worked out because the Ravens just were so standing so firm that they weren't going to do it. But I guess maybe there's just some negotiations that had to go on. So Lamar comes in, and what do they do to reward him for giving him that contract? They bring in some receiver help finally. I really do think they have improved the wide receiver room tremendously. Even if there's some questions still, it's still better than what it's been the past few seasons. New offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. So coming over from Georgia, University of Georgia. So what's your outlook on this offense? Because I think they're going to be good. I'm buying what they're doing.
No, I definitely agree. I think especially bringing in the coach from Georgia, I think is huge because Georgia, what we've seen is one of the most consistent, just like offensive presences in football in general. And that's kind of what was the big issue with, Greg Roman's offense was that it was very inconsistent and it was really lackluster at times. And it just didn't make sense sometimes with the routes they were making receivers run. And you have to play your player strengths. You can't just try to fit them in holes that they don't necessarily fit in. And I do agree with you. I like that they brought in receiver help. I think the one issue though is that two of their starting three receivers have a bit of an injury history with Beckham and Bateman. But when they're healthy, they're still pretty good. Zay Flowers, I'm a big Zay Flowers believer. I really like what he can bring. I like how shifty he is. Really good, off ball movements and like after the catch. So I think that's going to be really helpful. And I think he's going to be really helpful for Lamar. When plays break down, I think Zay Flowers is going to see a lot of targets. I think the whole like Lamar Jackson, QB contract thing was very strange as well. But it's best that they got it figured out because it'd be a shame if they had to restart and find a new quarterback when they didn't need one. They had Lamar.
Right.
So
They had an MVP quarterback on the roster and they were just dragging their feet with it. Yeah, I agree with Zay Flowers. I'm not once again, I haven't watched a ton of film, but just the fact that he was putting up those numbers at Boston College where you go from I honestly don't know who their quarterback was to Lamar Jackson in the NFL. Plus you got guys like Odell Beckham, Mark Andrews to take that pressure off you as a rookie.
mhm.
I think he's going to be great. And I think he's going
Yeah.
to be their wide receiver one by maybe a year from now.
Hmm.
Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. I have no reason to question it. I think it is interesting though. One thing I read up on Todd Monken, you look at Georgia's offense, especially last season, they had Bowers and Darnell Washington. Little two tight end set in college is something Monken really like to do. You have Isaiah Likely as well, who looked pretty solid as a rookie. Even Charlie Kolar, I call him Charlie Culture because I had him on my dynasty team. I think these two tight end sets are only going to increase for the Ravens under Monken. And not only is that going to help guys like Lamar and the running backs because you're going to have tight ends out there blocking a lot, but also you got these two, and Likely and especially Andrews, these two huge guys who can catch the ball, use that size to their advantage. I don't know. I just think even Bateman, I think, has shown flashes, and we know what Odell Beckham can do if he's healthy. I think they just have a ton of options, and even depth wise, Duvernay's their fifth receiver now. They have Aguilar, who say what you will, has been around for a while. He at least is a veteran. So I just think they have depth and they have talent at the top, and I think they're gonna be over 500 and probably even make the playoffs.
No, definitely. I think it was kind of interesting you mentioned the whole Andrews likely thing and Kolar too to some extent. I didn't even think about that, but it kind of goes to show like what they're doing with the receivers. They've got a lot of speed type guys, a lot of guys who can stretch the field. They're shifty, and then like you're saying, they're probably going to use a lot of two tight end sets because you just got two big targets you can throw it to. And I agree, it just gives them a lot of options with what they can do offensively and get more creative, which is I think what works best with Lamar Jackson's skill set. He's the guy who can make a play even when things break down. So by having so many different options available to him, I think that's huge. And we didn't even mention really the running backs. They still have J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. He's had injuries the past few years, but he's come back. Gus Edwards is a very solid running back. Even Justice Hill, to an extent, he wasn't too bad. So I agree with you. I think their offense is going to be killer. I think really it comes down to some of the offensive line changes they made and how their defense plays, especially.
Yeah, I think just on Dobbins real fast, he's really good when he came back after injury in down the stretch last year, but now he's on the pup list again. I just don't know what to expect from him, but I think it's good that when you have Lamar running out of the backfield, you have Edwards, who's a veteran, and they have all these options. I really do think, even if Dobbins can't fulfill that potential, I think they're going to be all right. You mentioned the O line. Real fast though, do you have any thoughts on Odell? I feel like we have to talk about him a little. He's on the 1 year deal. He tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. He was really good on the Rams after he got traded there. So it looked like he just needed to get back to an offense that had an above average quarterback. I know he kind of drug his feet signing last season. Do you think who do you think he's going to walk on and just be their number one receiver? Do you think Zay Flowers maybe will do that? I just think when you're paying a guy up to 15 million, even if it's a 1 year deal, I think they have expectations for him to be a high contributor. And I don't know. I actually like Odell Beckham. A lot of people don't, but I've always kind of been a fan. So what do you think?
No, I think a lot of people don't like him because there's a lot of media circus around him, and sometimes it is his fault. Sometimes it's just because people like to blow things out of proportion. I do think Odell should be their number one wide receiver because he's easily the most proven out of anyone on here. Zay Flowers, I think, has the potential to be better than I don't know about like Prime Odell because Prime Odell is a unique
Well, yeah, that's pretty
prime
incredible.
football player. He's unique in his own way. But Zay Flowers, I think, definitely has a potential to overtake him as the number one option at some point this season, possibly even. But Odell definitely should be their number one because he's by far the most proven player they have, and he's just people forget that he was really good in his prime just because of all the injuries and all of the like drama that's come with him recently. But he was a top three guy at one point. A lot of people consider him the best at some point. So I think Odell should come in and very clearly be the number one. But I think it also kind of depends on how he comes back from the injury and how he's picking up the offense because Rashad Bateman, he's been there for a few years now. So he could push him for that, but I think Odell should be considered the number one, and I think it'd be kind of weird if he wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As long as he's recovered from his injury, I think he'll at least have a high level role in this offense. So you mentioned the offensive line. It's weird. I think it's kind of the lesser known names on this O line. I feel like have performed the best. Like Zeitler and Moses were pretty solid last season. Patrick McCarry filled in for Ronnie Stanley last season. He was pretty solid. Linderbaum, the rookie center last year, he's very highly touted rookie, and he did get the job done as a rookie. So right
Mm-hmm.
now it's really just on that left side. I think the questions are because Ronnie Stanley, this was a first team All Pro tackle the year Lamar Jackson won MVP, and he's been nothing but snake bit with injuries since. And they're going to hope that this is the year he gets healthy. But if he doesn't, that's going to be a concern. They're paying him a lot of money. And then they have a fifth round pick in, I'm honestly not sure how to say this guy's name, but I'll try Malasela Umave Lalu. Fifth round rookie guard is currently projected by ESPN to be the starting left guard. Now, maybe Makari plays guard this season, but I don't know. That left side isn't looking too encouraging, all things considered.
Yeah, especially because like that's like his blind side, Lamar's
Right.
blind side. So I think the biggest as good as Ronnie Stanley is, it's like you mentioned, it's the injuries. He's great, but you can't count on him until you know he's fully healthy because unfortunately he's just been very up and down with that. And that's not his fault. It's unfair to him, but he's really good when he does play. So if he doesn't get injured, then I think it's not really going to be a huge issue. Um, and as for the rookie starting at left guard, I don't know if it's maybe because like they just have no one else, or maybe that he's just really that good.
Yeah.
But I think he's kind of the biggest X factor because Ronnie Stanley, it's more about his injury. If he's healthy, he should be good. It's I think the biggest issue is the left guard, but it seems that they have a lot of faith in him. So maybe that speaks volumes to his play. So
Yeah, I maybe he's just come in and earned the job. So I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see how the Ravens team thinks of his performance. So looking at their defense now, once again, I think they've improved it a lot recently. You start with the Roquan Smith trade at the deadline last season. That's one of the best inside linebackers in the league. He can do pretty much anything from that position. Patrick Queen got a lot better as he's gotten a little older here. Their D line is kind of it doesn't blow you away, but I feel like all the guys on that D line are pretty much there to just provide run stopping support. They're not really asking those guys to be elite. So I don't really know if that's an excuse or if that's a criticism. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. That's kind of how the Ravens have run that D line for a while now. So they kind of rely on the linebackers and the edge rushers there. Adafe Owe, former Penn State guy, Tyus Bowser as well, two outside linebackers. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like they need to prove it this year, so to speak. Tyus Bowser was injured last year, so we'll have to see. And then the secondary, I think, is pretty good for the most part. So what's your outlook on the defense here?
I would say I pretty much agree with everything you said. Their D line, it's nothing like spectacular, but that's never really been like they're not trying to, have like an Aaron Donald type player because that's not really what they need. Like you were saying, it's the edge rushers. And I agree, Owe and Bowser, especially. Bowser, he has injuries, so hopefully if he comes back, he should be better. But Owe really needs to step it up because he was drafted, I believe he was a second round draft pick the year they drafted him.
Yeah.
So they're expecting a lot out of him, and hopefully he can take this leap. So it kind of depends on them. I think Queen and Smith as their inside linebackers is an incredible duo. Probably one of the better inside linebacking duos in the league right now. So I do agree it comes down to their edge rushers. And I do like their starting secondary. I think Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton is a really good, strong duo if Kyle Hamilton continues to really improve, especially on his coverage skills. I think the bigger concern for me personally would be like Rocky Sims starting as one of their corners because he's kind of had like a really inconsistent career. Um,
Yeah.
and he's also like kind of injured right now as well. So it's kind of like up and down with that. So
Yeah, I was gonna lay into him, but then I looked at his season last year with Vegas. He was better than I thought he was. But as you said, he's kind of been inconsistent. He was pretty highly touted as a rookie. I don't think he was a first round pick, but I know the Colts had high expectations for him. So I don't know. This Ravens defense has produced pretty solid players out of the secondary. So maybe playing off Marlon Humphrey, who was awesome last year, had one of the better years of his career. Maybe that's going to help him. I feel like someone's missing from the secondary. I know Marcus Peters is gone, but I feel like didn't they have even another guy? I don't know. I was looking at the depth chart. I feel like someone is missing that used to be there, but I don't know. I still like Marlon Humphrey and those safeties a lot.
I wouldn't hit the panic button, but I think there should be some caution with the secondary because I think the secondary is not as strong as some people would like it to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time secondary, we've kind of laid into a lot of secondaries of these teams that we think are contenders. And also since the Dolphins episode, we saw Ramsey get injured for you, so that kind of changes the puzzle. I still think that Dolphins defense is good. But I don't know. I think maybe part of it is just because there's so many great offenses in the AFC that it's hard to measure up. But at the same time, I think it's fair to ask questions. I don't think saying Rock Yassine's going to have some trouble with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase is the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, no, especially just because depth is so important nowadays in the NFL with how many injuries continue to keep piling up. Like there's been a lot already this preseason, just like injuries, like you're saying, Ramsey, even Cam Smith, the other guy we drafted, who was for now was slotted into the starting spot. He's out, I think, 2 weeks with a shoulder injury. Thankfully, it's nothing too serious and he's going to come back just fine. But now we're down another starting cornerback. So I think it's totally valid to kind of lay into the depth because that's really where teams get tested late in the season when like injuries start to pile up and players aren't back yet for the playoffs because a lot of players they don't come back until the playoffs if their team make the playoffs because they're needed for that push. They need to make sure they're healthy. So depth is super important. So it makes sense to kind of talk about it a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so it'll be interesting to see how that secondary measures up. The one thing about the Ravens that I do love though is their special teams is lights out and they don't have to worry about it ever. I mean, you got Justin Tucker, who might wind up being the best kicker in league history. Jordan Stout, former Penn State punter, was pretty awesome as a rookie. And then Duvernay is super fast and a really good returner, former All-Pro returner. So I think they're completely set, and that's going to help them, especially come playoff time when every little play matters. I think that's going to help.
Mhm.
So do you think the Ravens, before we get into these last two teams, do you have a playoff outlook for them, or do you think it's going to be more of a fight just because of the AFC is so deep?
I would say I wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs, but I think they're definitely strongly in the fighting for a wild card spot, just because I think the AFC is definitely the more loaded division in terms of just offensive firepower, compared to the NFC. So I think that's kind of where the trouble is, not because they're not good, just because there's just so many other teams who are a bit better rounded, I would say personally. So I think that's their biggest issue. But if things go well for them, they could easily get a wild card spot. And I wouldn't like be like, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe they did that. So
Yeah, I agree. So one team that I think every year, us, other fans are like, no, it's gonna be crazy if they make the playoffs. And then they just win and make the playoffs or fight for a playoff spot, even though no one thinks it's the Steelers. And it's the same story again this season. It's how are the Steelers gonna match up against this AFC conference that has 10 teams that you like, but yet they're well coached, they're gritty, they got a good defense, and they've got, I was gonna say it, the winning culture. So I don't know what's your we can start with the offense here, just whether it's Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris. There's a bunch of question marks supposedly, but I don't know. I was looking at this roster, I was considering some things. And while I have a hard time believing this is a playoff team, I really do think that there's reason for optimism for the Steelers fans. What's your take on them this year? Last year, we're like, oh, this is going to be the year they don't win, they don't go over 500, and they just continue to do it. So
I think Mike Tomlin is too good of a coach for this team to like completely just like evaporate and just disappear. I just think the bigger problem is that although this team, I think I agree with you. Looking at the team, I think it's a lot more solid than some people would think. I just don't think they really have the consistency and the high end talent to like really get them there. You have guys like George Pickens who probably will be that high end talent. I think George Pickens, I'm very high on George Pickens. I think what like just he catches basically everything in like the craziest ways. Like his catch radius is insane. But I think the problem is that there's not a lot of players outside of, key guys like, Mink Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, George Pickens that really stand out to you as like these are game changers that are really going to push this team over the edge. And that's not to disparage people like, Kenny Pickett or Najee Harris, but Najee Harris, unfortunately, last year he had a pretty down year. It wasn't his best, although we've seen him be good. So I'm not super concerned about him. I think he'll bounce back this year. Kenny Pickett really improved towards the end of the year. So it kind of depends on how his development continues. I just don't think this team they could make the wild card definitely over 500 because it seems Tomlin, if there's one thing he's pushing this team to, it's an over 500 season. But they're probably fighting for a wild card spot, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make the playoffs.
yeah, I think playoffs is really hard to come by. I'll explain why I kind of like this team. Even on offense, I feel like they have a shot. I just think Kenny Pickett accuracy is obviously what he has to improve the most. We saw it his rookie season. And he's also he's doesn't have a cannon of an arm necessarily, but I think he can spread the ball around. I think he has good instincts, and he just feels like a leader. I don't know. I just feel like that last month of the season, you watching those games, it just felt like he was getting comfortable in that offense, and it was an offense with an inconsistent, bad offensive line. The run game was all over the place. Wide receiver wise, besides Pickens, didn't really have a lot of people you could really count on. I don't know, and he was still making them compete. He got them to 9-8. I just feel they've given him a little more support this year, a little more protection. They made some offensive line moves. I don't know if he's going to be a star ever. I would say he's not, but I think he can get a lot better. I went back and looked at some of his pre-draft like scouting reports that some people did. I saw someone compared him to prime Andy Dalton. I think that's pretty much what the Steelers should hope from him because Andy Dalton was pretty solid for a few years, got some teams in the playoffs. So I think if he can get to that level of quarterback, just improve his accuracy a little bit, connect with these receivers, and just be the leader that it seems like he is, I think he can get this Steelers team to be competitive for the coming seasons. And I'm confident that he'll do it. And then Najee Harris, as you alluded to, he just has the talent. He's that good. And once again, I was looking at Pro Football Reference. He led the league in touches as a rookie, and last season he had the fifth most carries in the league. The Steelers clearly believe in him to be a guy with a high workload. It just feels like he needs to work on his explosiveness a little bit. It feels like he's kind of just been a 4 or 5 yard carry guy, not a lot of huge plays so far. But then the offensive line was always an issue as well. But then they've kind of addressed the offensive line. What do you think about Najee and then also the moves they made along the O line? Because I think they got a lot better over the past year or two.
I think the problem with Najee last year, especially, was that he was just really indecisive with where he wanted to go because the O line wasn't that great. So you have to have like a really good instinct for that. Like he hesitated a lot. It was kind of similar to like it wasn't dissimilar to the way Le'Veon Bell would be patient, but the problem was is that he was too hesitant and then didn't really have the burst to really hit the hole. And I think Najee Harris would benefit from probably like maybe losing a little bit of weight, just to see if he gets lighter, more explosive, or at the very least that or fixing just the hesitancy that he's having. Because Najee Harris, he's like a power back. And so we've seen explosive plays from him in college. So I think it's more about just like getting comfortable with an improved offensive line. I think their offensive line, like you said, I think they definitely addressed it, but I don't think it's anything like to write home about either. I think that it really kind of depends on how some of these younger guys develop. But I think it's not like improbable. I see why you like this team. I don't think they're the worst team either. I just there's nothing that like super stands out to me outside of like their few players we know are very good. And it kind of just depends on like how the team works out once the season comes around because maybe they start playing games and like, wow, they're just working super well together. Their chemistry is clicking, and maybe that makes them play better than maybe some would believe their skill level lends to. So,
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that Broderick Jones, their first round left tackle, is not projected to start right now, but I'm hoping that's just like ESPN being wrong and he's just going to be ready to do that because he's probably, if he could be good right away, be a first round level tackle. And we've seen a lot of left tackles come in and be impact guys as rookies over the past few seasons. So I think that should be an expectation. If he can do that, they signed Isaac Seumalo, they signed James Daniels 2 years ago. I do think they've addressed and improved. So I'm hoping that can lead to Kenny and Najee having good seasons if that works out for them. And then receiver wise, I mean, we addressed Pickens, but even Deontay Johnson and Allen Robinson were probably maybe two of the most disappointing receivers in the league last season, but we know how talented both those guys are. So
mhm.
it's just the offense can improve in general. Now Matt Canada is still leading this offense, calling the plays. So maybe that's still a cause for concern. I talked to my friend Alex Osmond about this in the spring. He's a Steelers fan. He explained to me that the Steelers never fire coordinators. They only let their contract expire. It's like a policy thing. So I guess that's why Matt Canada is still in Pittsburgh. Like Steelers are a team though, very rooted in tradition. We've seen how few coaching changes they've made over the years. So I guess that's why. So we'll have to see. Maybe Matt Canada can maybe he's done some studying this offseason. He's improved. I have
I
no idea.
I think that's going to be the biggest thing is like, can Matt Canada really help elevate this offense? Because for me, I think that the Steelers can be a good team in the future if Kenny Pickett continues to improve. They're missing a few pieces that they really need. And I would agree with you that Broderick Jones not being penciled in as a starter is kind of concerning. I know for his preseason debut, a lot of people were complaining about he was late with his hands, wasn't really getting that like first punch in that you like from your offensive lineman. So hopefully he continues to improve. I just don't know if this is their year, but I think if they show a lot of improvement and there's some solid new pieces added next year along with a good development, I think they could really improve again and become a like prime contending playoff team.
Yeah, and just defensively, we don't need to spend a ton of time on it, but TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, they brought in Patrick Peterson and Joey Porter Jr. at corner, which I think is going to completely transform the secondary. I mean, it was already pretty solid, I guess, but I think they're going to get a lot better
Mm-hmm.
this season. I think Joey Porter Jr. maybe the criticism is he didn't make a ton of interceptions in college, but he's just watching him play, just a very physical corner. And Patrick Peterson, 5 interceptions last season, kind of had a resurgence in Minnesota. So, and then even like Alex Highsmith, I think plays great off TJ Watt because TJ Watt's getting double teamed all the time out, and Alex Highsmith is fast enough he gets in there for some sacks. I'm interested in your take because one of the they brought in a lot of veterans at inside linebacker to kind of fill the hole. One of them being a Landon Roberts, who's on the Dolphins last few seasons, and also Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander. So three veterans that we've seen rack up a lot of tackles, but kind of, available for a cheap price. But they kind of go in committee approach there. What's your thoughts on that group? Maybe primarily Landon Roberts since you watched him play, but just in general.
I I like Landon Roberts and what he does for run stuffing. The biggest issue is that he offers almost nothing in terms of coverage.
Okay.
And I don't like because he's very good at what he does in run stuffing, but the problem is he doesn't really do a lot in coverage, which is a lot of time you'd see him subbed out on third downs because he just wasn't able to cover running backs fast enough because he's a big thumper kind of linebacker. And I think that's why it's good that they brought in Quan Alexander. I think it's kind of weird that Quan Alexander hasn't been like consistently on a team. I understand that he's like getting older and slowing down, but I mean, at one point in time, Quan Alexander on the Bucks was one of the better linebackers in the
Yeah.
league. So it's kind of weird that he's bounced around so much, but I think that's a good pickup for them. And I think Cole Holcomb, he gets the job done as well. I just think that their biggest strong suit is the edge linebackers. It's Watt and Highsmith. And I think if they get their job done, I think that takes off a lot of pressure off Holcomb, Roberts, Alexander. The committee approach, I don't like. I think they should have drafted a young linebacker, throw someone in there. Maybe they did. I don't know. Mark Robinson, he's like listed behind Roberts. I don't know if he's like a young guy. I don't really know who he is. So maybe he's the young guy they brought in. Um, I think it's the best approach they could do.
He was a seventh round pick last season.
Well, maybe he can improve. So I think their linebacking core isn't necessarily bad. It's just nothing spectacular either. There's no one that like really jumps out at you besides the edge guys.
I think
Uh,
they're also counting on that D line, Cam Hayward leading the way to just stop the run before it gets to those guys. But like you said, Elena Roberts and Cole Holcomb, I think, are also
yeah,
good.
I mean, I agree with you. I think they're just really counting on like the guys they know get the job done to help lighten the load on the others. And I don't think that's like the worst decision. They're doing the best they could. They had to sign a bunch of cheap linebackers.
Yeah, and I would say I think the way they've revamped this secondary, along with just counting on improvement from Kenny Pickett in year two, is why I'm still gonna say this Steelers team can get to 9 wins because one, you look at their schedule. This division's playing primarily. They're playing the NFC West and the AFC South. I mean, that's the Colts, the Titans, the Texans, the Cardinals, who I think are going to be horrid. So I think the Steelers they get some wins through those things. They'll split some divisional matchups here, throw in a win or two that you don't expect, and they're going to get the 9 wins. I think this team actually improved more than most people expect. So I think this team is going to be better than this last team we're going to talk about, the Cleveland Browns. And I think the Browns, they have talent. It's not even, I'm not even trying to be like, go up on my moral pedestal. That's not why I'm picking against the Browns. It really doesn't even have to do with Watson's off the field past. At this point with Watson, like, I think we talked about this last year, but he's just going to play. I mean, you don't have to root for Cleveland. I mean, but I like a lot of their players that aren't Deshaun Watson, which kind of frustrates me.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your take on what they're doing? Because I really actually think their roster is good, but there's certain holes on the defense that concern me. And then also, not only is Watson disliked, but he also was really bad when he came back last.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see how he progresses now that he's fully back in the mix.
No, I agree. I like at this point, there's no real point in like moral high grounding it because at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson, like you said, he's gonna play. But I agree with you. He was not the Deshaun Watson of old. And especially in that first game against the Texans, his old team, it was a rough start for him,
Mhm.
which is what he deserves. But I just a lot of people were counting on Deshaun Watson getting back into form, and that's not the craziest leap to take. But I think I mean, a year off from football, you maybe develop some bad habits for like your throwing and stuff like that. So who knows what's going to go on with that. I mean, I agree. I like a lot of their players. I like Nick Chubb. I like Amari Cooper. But I do agree with you. There's definitely some holes, especially on the defense, like you were saying, that are kind of a little worrisome. I don't. I think they have a lot of good players at certain positions. I think the problem is there's some positions that don't really have anyone
Mhm.
that's like really stand out. And I think that's their biggest issue is that where they have holes, they're very big holes.
Yeah. Offensively, I guess what you want to say is Nick Chubb is maybe the best running back in the league. They
Hmm.
still have a really good offensive line. Jerome Ford's going to step into Kareem Hunt's role as that complimentary back. I think he's going to nail it. That he was really good in college,
Hmm.
and I think I've heard good things. I haven't heard things. I've read good things about Jerome Ford. So I think that's the run game. I think is going to continue to be a strong suit for them. Amari Cooper, he's Mr. Consistency. You don't need to doubt him. I think the X factor in the receiver room, people want to say it's Elijah Moore. I think it's Cedric Tillman as the rookie. We just need to see what he brings. I think People Jones and Joku are who they are. And I don't know, man. Elijah Moore just kind of pissed me off last year, being, well, my quarterback sucks, so I'm just gonna suck too. Like, I don't know. That's basically I know there's more to it than that. I know that's probably not actually what happened, but generally speaking, that's the vibe I got. Like once Zach Wilson threw one too many interceptions, he completely quit. And Elijah Moore was good as a rookie with Zach Wilson. So I just kind of didn't get that. And I think it also speaks volumes that the Jets weren't going to keep him around for Aaron Rodgers.
If he gets back to like how he was as a rookie, I think that's totally solid. But the problem is like Peoples Jones, I like Peoples Jones, but it kind of seems like he's really not going to continue to take that next step, unfortunately. There's a chance he does, but it's kind of like he's just kind of like flatlined more or less. I think Cedric Tillman, if Elijah Moore, does continue to kind of stumble, he's going to be huge. David Bell, I know the preseason you shouldn't take so much stock into it, but he played pretty decently. I think Cedric Tillman, I thought he was really good at Tennessee. I'm surprised he went as low as he did in the draft. I thought he was going to go a bit higher than that. I like the receiving room. I think there's a lot of young guys in there, but I think if they improve, especially with Amari Cooper ahead of him, he's like you're saying, Mr. Consistent. He's always got great hands. I think Amari Cooper is really underrated as one of the better wide receivers in the league. So I don't know. I think the receiver room has talent. I don't know if this is necessarily their year because a lot of these guys still need to keep developing. But if Elijah Moore gets back into form and Tillman and Bell, they develop faster than you expect, their receiving room could be pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's the potential is there. I agree. I just I'm more confident in the Ravens and Steelers taking that next step than this team. I don't know. It's just I think the Watson thing is the biggest question mark because this is a guy who's a top five quarterback in the league, and
Hmm.
you would have said, yeah, he's going to get the job done. He's going to elevate all these guys, and I don't know. He's just a major question mark for a lot of reasons. So I think they are going to compete on offense.
Hmm.
Defensively, it's just strange to me because I feel like I know all these names, but then if you look into like what they've been doing the last couple seasons, they're not as good or performing the way you want them to. Besides, of course, Myles Garrett, who is a freaking wrecking ball, two straight 16 sack seasons. So their new defensive coordinator, I was talking to my friend Matt Mueller, who we did this pod with once last season, uh, talking about Jim Schwartz, former Eagles defensive coordinator, is taking over this job. Jim Schwartz's thing is blitz, blitz, blitz. He's done that for a while. He did it with the Lions as well. And it works at times. I mean, obviously, 2017 Eagles, it worked. They had the secondary to back it. As
Hmm.
Jim Schwartz's Eagles tenure went on, when the number one corner was Ronald Darby, stuff like that, that strategy didn't really work as well, and it kind of led to some issues.
Hmm.
So this front seven for the Browns, I think they're not suited for Jim Schwartz's style of defense. I think they made a lot of moves to improve the run defense, which is something they need to do because they were a pretty bad run defense last season. I don't think Jim Schwartz was a good defensive coordinator hire for this personnel. I mean, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Okoronkwo, like these are run stuffing guys, and they're good, especially Dalvin Tomlinson, who got a huge contract. But I don't know. I mean, Z Smith they signed, Zadarius, former Packer turncoat, went to Minnesota, then Minnesota cut him. He was pretty good last year off the edge. He did have double digit sacks again, but I don't know. And then secondary wise, I'm not crazy about what happens when they do blitz like that. So I don't know. What's your take on this defense? I just feel like it's really uneven, even though you recognize a lot of names.
No, I agree. I think it's kind of like it's what you're saying, especially that's kind of what happened with the Dolphins. Brian Flores's his heavy blitz packages, when they caught an opponent off guard, especially an opponent with like a bad O line or just like a quarterback who doesn't release the ball too quickly, it really worked. But the problem was when it didn't, our secondary was not good enough at the time. Like when Flores was running the heavy blitz packages, and even last year or not last year, 2 years ago, we saw some of that still as well. Like Boyer especially, they just ran a lot of like cover zero, and X at the time was like our only good like
Yeah.
a secondary guy. So like he couldn't cover everyone, and I think the problem is that they're relying on some guys in their secondary, especially who have been very inconsistent. Greg Newsome, not that he can't be good. The problem is he's dealt with a lot of injuries coming into his career, so he's kind of an unknown. Juan Thornhill, he was really good his rookie year for the Chiefs, but then he got injured, and then he kind of just disappeared from their starting lineup entirely. And Denzel Ward, he's really good, and Grant Delpit's pretty good too. They're pretty consistent, but the problem is
Even
Ward's.
Denzel Ward to me, even Denzel Ward, he's good. Don't get me wrong, but not the most consistent elite corner in the league, I would say. I
Yeah,
don't know. I
and
think
he's
there's
injured right now too, unfortunately.
yeah, he's
So
dealing with
that's not good. But
banged
yeah,
up.
no, he's kind of up and down sometimes. But I think when he's good, he's really good.
Martin Emerson was really good as a rookie. I'll say that. He had
He
15 pass
was.
deflections, kind of out of no, not out of nowhere. He was kind of a high draft pick, but he was pretty good right away. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm Juan Thornhill. I don't really see him as a difference maker. And Grant Delpit was obviously a hugely talented guy coming out of LSU. Missed his rookie season, kind of started to bounce back last season as a run stopper, but I feel like coverage wise still struggled a bit from what I saw. I don't know. And then linebacker wise, Anthony Walker's back, which is big, but I still don't really like that group as well. So yeah, like I already said, I kind of uneven to me, and I don't think they're going to be able. I think it's the worst defense in this division. I'll say that.
No, I agree. I think like Anthony Walker and like even like if you look at like Taki Taki as well, like these are dudes like we personally recognize, but the thing is they're not like amazing. They're guys who, they're serviceable, but they're nothing more than that, which is not what you need from like a really heavy, like blitz heavy. You need guys who are like solid, consistent, and really get the job done. Like you were saying, Grant Delpit as well. He's also low and consistent. I think that's like the word to describe this defense. A lot of the players that they're really counting on have been inconsistent. JOK,
Yeah.
he was pretty good coming out of college, but we haven't seen like a lot of that like in the league yet. So I think consistency is what's going to be really important for this team. And on top of the fact that they also just don't have some of the high end talent you need at some certain positions.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they have. Anthony Walker had a good season his first year in Cleveland, but he wasn't that great with the Colts. Like, I don't know. It's just you're counting a guy coming off a quad tear who had one above average season to just be the number one linebacker. I don't know. I agree with you. I think our points make sense. I don't know. Maybe the Browns prove us wrong, but I think that's the whole thing with this Browns team is they basically are saying everyone outside is clowning on us and saying we're not doing things right. If they are locked in and they think it's all going to go right from this season, maybe it will, and they have talent. And I like some of the talent. I think, like we said on the offense, I think some of it will thrive, but I just don't see a world where this team is a playoff team this year, despite that talent. There's always these teams. I mean, Eagles fans know the 2015 Eagles are a great example. There's this team every year that on paper the talent is there, but it's not always just about the talent. So I think that can prove itself.
It's kind of annoying because like you don't want to be the guy that's always like, well, you never know any given Sunday, right?
Yeah, about any team, yeah.
But like there's just some teams where like you can't really say that because there's not like the gems you're looking for that like you're like, oh, maybe if things work out, like if this rookie develops well, if this veteran can bounce back from this injury. But I just don't see that as much with this team, which I think is kind of like we're both in agreement on is that there's just something lacking and they need to, if they can find it, maybe they can make it work, scrap together an over 500 season. But if they don't, I'm not going to be surprised if they're like one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah. Worst team in the league, I wouldn't go that far, but I definitely think they could be towards
Well,
the bottom half. Yeah.
yeah, I shouldn't have said like one of the worst because that implies like bottom five, but like and yes, in the
Sure.
lower half, like you're
Yeah,
saying.
for
Yeah.
sure. So I think we're pretty in lockstep. I don't even know if we need to run through our standings predictions here, but what's your take on the order for this division? I think as we go, there's some divisions we might disagree with more, but
Definitely. I would say personally, I'm thinking Bengals, Ravens, Steelers, Browns,
yeah.
but Ravens and Steelers, depending on how some of these guys come along, they could switch. But for now, I'm leaning Ravens just because of how high powered I think their offense
Yeah.
will
I
be.
think, yeah, like we talked about, I think that Ravens offense is going to be really,
No,
really good.
definitely.
So I'm excited to see it. Yeah, I think Bengals and Ravens are playoff teams. And I'm not even saying it just because Mike Tomlin goes over 500 every year. Like, I actually do believe that Steelers team, with the schedule as I outlined, I think they can get to 9 wins. Browns, I feel like they're a 6 win team. There's going to be weeks where it all clicks and Watson's going to connect with these receivers and it's going to look good. And I don't know. I just think that consistency, as we talked about, I don't think it's going to be there for Cleveland this season.
If they can find it, like you're saying, maybe some weeks, but it's kind of up in the air with them.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting division to follow as the season progresses. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening today. Catch us next time. We'll be doing the AFC South, which, as usual, one of the worst divisions in football, but at least the Jags are in that division. So we're excited to talk about that. So thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day.